Hello everybody. Thank you for tuning in and joining us for this webinar. My name is Michael Brady. I'm a technical trainer here at InterSystems, and today we're going to be talking about monitoring message volume and disk space in Ensembl and HealthShare productions. I'm also here with Shane Rose. Shane, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Shane Rose. I'm also a technical trainer here with InterSystems, teaching Ensembl and Cache courses.
Excellent. Thank you, Shane. All right, so let's go ahead and get going. Okay, so here what we're doing is we're talking about, first we're going to talk about monitoring message volume, then we're going to get into the monitoring disk space stuff. Okay, so monitoring message volume. As you know, you can use Ensembl or Health Connect or HealthShare in many different ways. Here I have a couple diagrams set up of one way to use Ensembl with some application. Here it would be like an ESB with some application or an enterprise service bus. Over here we have just the common use case for Health Connect, where Health Connect is sitting in between all of the applications at one hospital, you can imagine, and the main EMR sends a message into Health Connect, and Health Connect, or you might be familiar with the term Ensembl, really the same thing for this case. Health Connect integrates all the applications at the hospital. Okay, so first what I'd like to do is just get some interaction from you guys, and we'll send out a poll. Basically, this poll is going to ask you, how many of you out there in the audience are using Ensembl to integrate applications in the healthcare space? And how many of you are using Ensembl for something else? This poll will also help me get a feel for where the audience is coming from. I already kind of saw a list of attendees. I know a lot of folks are using Ensembl or Health Connect in the healthcare space. So we're going to talk about some HL7 use cases, but pretty much everything we learn here applies to other use cases as well. So let me just go ahead and peek at the results of that. Is your organization using InterSystems technology for HL7 integration? Yes or no? Okay, so it looks like we have most folks saying yes. We have like one person saying no, and then we got some no answer. So that's okay too. Okay, so let's fall into why it's important. So thanks for answering that poll. Let's fall into why it's important to monitor message volume. Okay, so here we're just talking about having an Ensembl do something sophisticated to count the number of messages passing through a production. Okay. So here, if Ensembl is used as an ESB in front of some application, we could also describe this as a tethered setup. It's tethered to some other application. So Ensembl could be accepting SOAP messages, REST messages. Okay, it could have some TCP connection open with a client, and that's sending messages in that way. Very valuable here to actually monitor the traffic across all these different protocols, so you really know how many requests are coming into your application. Okay. It's a lot harder to count that inside the application, write all that code yourself. You have this fancy messaging engine, which is Ensembl. Very nice to just count it right inside there. The tools that I'm going to show you, they're the activity volume and monitoring statistics, basically. They also do other stuff like monitor the duration of the amount of time it takes for a particular component to process a message. And we can also aggregate that up over just an hour or entire day or an entire week. Okay? Health Connect, of course, tremendous value if you're able to monitor all of the messages flowing through Health Connect, or again, you might have Ensembl here as well. So when a main EMR admits a patient, this could be Epic, this could be Cerner, TrackCare, whatever it may be, main EMR admits a patient, say for Maria G here, okay, we're going to send an ADT message, of course, over into Health Connect. And then Health Connect basically blasts the other 20 or could be 40 applications at the hospital, and it says, hey, this is Maria Gonzalez. Here's her medical record number. It's 4455. And then all of those applications at the hospital, this is one hospital, agree, okay, Maria Gonzalez, she's 4455. She's admitted. She's in the hospital right now. Also, similarly, right, when the lab results publish results that need to get sent back into the EMR or other places, the lab's going to send that back through Health Connect, and we're going to go here. Okay, so you might want to count, for example, how many ADT messages, ADT AO1s admits the EMR is actually sending. Okay, maybe you just want to know how many messages the EMR is sending. Okay, maybe you want to know how many results you're getting back from the lab. Okay, so this is a really nice way to basically monitor the traffic between applications in your organization. Okay, so lots of value there. Okay, and once you can monitor message volume, okay, I think these volumes can likely grow over time. So it's important to understand, like, is my message volume stable? Is it roughly the same amount of messages every day? And again, we can drill down to just measure that for a particular component, or we can know across the whole production. So is it stable? Is it going down? Is it going up? Okay, if it's going up, that's maybe even like the most interesting or worrisome case, because if it's going up even just a few percentage points every day, you have to be prepared for that. Maybe you need new hardware. Maybe you need to allocate more disk space for that production. So all things to be aware of. This is really just setting yourself up to understand what your production is doing so that you can plan for the future. Okay. Also, it provides value to other folks in the organization that can't so easily measure that stuff. Since you have the fancy integration engine, you can measure that right in Ensembl. Okay, so basically how this works is if we have a production and you have a particular component here. So this is a business service, okay, from EMR, TCP we'll call it. Okay, how that works is the utility I'm going to show you puts entries into 3 tables. Okay, basically what it does is every second it says, okay, second 1, I processed 5 messages. So this is like the per second table. Okay, and then it makes more entries up. The next one, I process 10 messages. Okay, obviously you're using this in a different case, maybe not an HL7 case. We're assuming this is HL7 here. You know, maybe it's more messages per second. Okay, and it's a lot of input. Okay, so we have a bunch there, 10, making an entry every single second. So obviously you might be thinking that table could get very big, especially if you're doing this for every component and you have hundreds of business services in your production and processes and operations. We're going to talk about that concern later. We're also making an entry into this per hour table. So maybe it's like, you know, you processed 1,000 messages in the first hour and then 1,100 messages, okay, in the second hour, and so on and so on. Okay, we also store it in another table, and that one is per day. Okay, so we're aggregating this data over here, and then we can say, you know, there's 20,000 in a day or whatever it may be. Okay, so we can turn this on for a particular component. Maybe there are certain components that you're not interested in monitoring their activity, but there's others, like the component that is accepting messages from the main EMR. You're interested in that. So you can turn it on for just particular components. Very useful to just kind of turn it on for all the components in the production, and that's what I'm going to do in the demo. Okay. Okay, so 3 different tables we're making entries into. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop over to the demonstration, and we'll dig around Ensembl, and I'll go ahead and set this up. And look at that, I have a production up already. It's like a cooking show where they just have it already prepped. Okay, so here's my production, very, very simple, right? I just have a business service that sends to a process, and then a process that actually, well, the process sends to both business operations. Okay, so to turn on the volume monitoring statistics for this production, what we have to do is we have to add a special business operation that's there for us out of the box. Okay, the operation is ENS activity operation local. Okay, so we just add that, and I'm going to enable it right away. Okay, so we're just plugging and playing that operation right there. We don't need to do any customization for it. Okay, by the way, everybody, obviously these steps are very, very well documented. If you come over here to Ensembl Management Guides, Monitoring Ensembl, okay, here I'm in documentation, right? All the way here, Monitoring Activity Volume. Okay, this is the guide that tells you how to do what I'm about to do. Okay, and also explains the stuff about the hours and the seconds and the days and all that. Okay. Okay, so we added that business operation to the production. We have to do something. We have to enable the fact that we're gathering these statistics. So here I come into terminal, which I already have set up as well. I have to say do #class ens.util statistics enable stats for production. That's all very well documented, okay? So I press and enter there. Now, okay, if I look at the settings for this component, every 60 seconds, okay, that's the stats interval, we're going to go ahead and make entries into those special tables I was telling you about. Okay, we're storing, the namespace we're going to store all that information in is webinar demo. That's the namespace I'm in right now. However, if you had multiple productions running on one system, for example, you have your ADT and ORM interfaces running in one namespace, you have devices and vitals data running in another namespace, you have another production and namespace for FTP interfaces, you might want to, gather information about the components in each one of those 3 productions and then store them all together so you can query the table. Okay, so you don't have to store these in the same namespace as the production. We're just doing that to keep it simple here. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually send some data in here. All right, and first, it looks like from file 2 right now is actually sending to that router. I want to send that to from file router 2. Okay, so kind of just have like 2 parallel paths set up here. Okay, so in my C Ensembl folder, in HL7, I have this many patients.txt. There's a ton of HL7 messages in there, okay? So I'm going to take that many patients and just paste that right into my HL7 in folder. I'm also going to paste it into in2, okay? So now we have one business service reading in one of those files. This other business service is reading in the other file. Okay, you can see they're reading into C Ensembl HL7 into and just in respectively, the way they're named there. Okay. And you can see if I go to the message tab, 10:51, that's the time. Okay, tons of messages. A lot of these are queued, right? Interesting here, you don't often always get to see a queue in a demo, so let's go to queues page just to take a look at that. And you can see there are a lot of messages here queued up on our routers. That's because that file has thousands of messages in it. So it's going to take my machine a second to process. And if you're in the room with me, you can actually hear the fan kick on my machine because it's working hard to process that huge file. So just take a couple seconds to do that. Okay, so your next question might be, well, okay, Michael, where are those tables? You turn this stuff on to gather, to monitor the activity volume. Where do those tables actually live? Well, if I go over here to System Explorer, SQL, okay, here I'm looking in webinar demo, and the table happens to be called ines_activity. Okay, so here we have our 3 tables: days, hours, seconds. Okay, so if I just want to look at the activity in the last hour, I could go ahead and open that table, and you see we have a ton of entries in here. Okay, this information is very, very useful. And so let's just look at one particular component. Let's look at toFile here. Actually, we're going to look at from file router. Okay, so that's a business process. So here we can see from a file router. In this hour, this interval, which is yesterday, let me blow this up a little bit for you guys, which was yesterday, May 3rd, okay, we processed 292 nope, let's go down one. We processed 5,335 messages, okay. The total time it took to process all of those messages was 13 seconds, which is actually pretty impressive, I would say. Here, we're actually separating this out. Those are just the ADTs that business process processed, okay? We're also separating that out on AO8s and ORM 001s. This makes this really nice because if you wanted to write your own report, so this is what this feature is really for, right? You wanted to write your own report to query this table. No, how many ADTs do I process throughout the day? And maybe I want to plot that or graph that per hour. You can do that here. We're not muddled up with ORMs and ADTs altogether. So we have a separate row or a separate entry in this table for ORMs versus ADT-A01s versus ADT-A08s. Very, very nice there. Okay, so that's a really nice feature. Of course, if you don't care about that, you can just change your query a little bit, and you could aggregate these all together and then say, okay, from file router in that 1 hour, it actually processed, 5,000 plus 5,000 plus 2,000, 2,000, whatever that is, north of 14,000 there. Okay, other things, you got some standard deviation stuff with the total duration square over here. I'm not going to go into all of that, okay? Really, so that's really, really nice if you have a high standard deviation there. Maybe you know it's you have a big variability on like the size of your messages. That could be one thing. Maybe you have messages coming in that have an embedded PDF or something like that. Or some data transformations take a long time. Some messages take a long time to route. Some are super fast. So also interesting to look at a high standard deviation there, or a low one. Low one is obviously good as well. Okay, you also might be thinking you can easily do arithmetic and combine some of these columns, and of course you can do that. Okay, let's look at the entries that were made just today. So here, these entries down here at the bottom, where the hour window is 10 o'clock, that's the window that just got created because I just said to monitor this activity here. And you can see we're doing thousands of messages there as well. Okay, and of course we have our seconds, right? Even more entries here because it's literally every second. And then you have your days. Okay, we're just separating this out by day. Notice it's nice here, you have host type, so each host has a different type. So you could just gather up all the services together and then take the aggregate of the, how many messages did all of my services process today. Very easy to write a query here the way this table is designed. Okay. Now we also have a little dashboard for you if you don't want to write your own queries and don't want to write your own reports. Okay, that dashboard is over in DeepSea. So if you want to use that, our pre-built dashboard, or if you wanted to use DeepSea to write your own code and your own KPIs, if you know what that is, basically your own code to generate your own SQL queries and all that, you can do that. What you have to do first is enable DeepSea for that namespace. You do that by going to System Administration, Security, Applications, Web Applications. And basically I have to go down here and say this webinar demo namespace, I got to enable DeepSea for that. Of course I already did that. Okay. So DeepSea is enabled, cool. So then I can use this out-of-the-box dashboard. Okay, and the dashboard is slick, guys, but the real power there is the fact that you can get all of the different components in the production to make those entries into the table. And if you only want some of them, you can only do some of them. And then you can write your own queries, create your own dashboard, create your own reports to show other folks in the organization. Each organization will have different concerns, right? You only want to count ADTs. Another organization wants to count some other kind of message. Maybe you're really concerned with, there's a peak of activity around 10 o'clock that you figure out, and you want to look deeper into that. All different use cases there. Okay, so here I'm in DeepSea webinar demo. Let's go into the user portal. Okay, and here's this pre-built dashboard that we can look at. We have a whole DeepSea class where you learn much more about DeepSea and how to create dashboards and how to create, create your own cubes. For here, let's just look at, let me reset this. So it's real small there, the way this pre-built dashboard works, everybody. But you can see we're aggregating the from file router entries together, and you can see, okay, so today, period of time today, here it's done, 25,000 messages, and there's a total duration and all that good stuff. Okay, so this is just the pre-built dashboard that was simply there because I enabled the stats for production, I added the business operation, so everything's working, and then we just have this dashboard available to us. Okay, so this is nice, but the real power is really under the hood there with the tables. Now you might be thinking, okay, whoa, for every single component you're making entries. You're making entries per second. I have 200 components in my production. That could get really big very quick. And I'd say, yeah, you're right. Now, it's not big relative to the size of HL7 messages or if you're handling some other large messages. But, making entries every second will definitely add up. So what you must do is you need to come into System Operation Task Manager, New Task, and create a task to purge those tables, okay? You have to do this. So the idea is that in Webinar Demo, we want to run the we want to run the, there we go, purge activity data task, okay? And then basically, so I would say like purge, I'll call this purge activity data seconds. Okay, so this is just a task, just some codes that's going to run, and luckily this task is pre-built, okay? And we're going to say, okay, for seconds, you know what? I want to keep 7 days just to have that really deep granularity, that fine granularity for 7 days. But so every day, purge the 8th day is basically what that means. So we're keeping 7 days of the seconds data. We schedule that. We would schedule this to run every day, maybe at midnight, and then we're purging the seconds table, okay? You would also want to do that with the, let's go back to the webinar demo namespace. You'd also want to do that with the hours table as well. That's obviously going to add up and creep up on you. So one recommended approach is, just keep a couple of days worth of the seconds data, maybe purge every, keep 7 days, meaning purge every 8th day. Maybe you want to keep a whole year's worth of the hours data. That way you can look and see how actually busy Ensembl is in the morning. That gives you insight onto how busy the hospital is in the morning, right? Versus how busy it is at night. And then you could actually just keep your days data forever, okay? And that way, as you have your implementation of Ensembl, you've been growing steadily over a couple years, you can get some nice insight from your production and your integration solution, how much it's grown over time if you just keep this days data forever. Okay. Okay, so that's most of what I have on the activity and volume monitoring stuff. Shane, do you think there's anything I should add there? Or was there anything you'd like to add? No. Okay. So that's really the first part, all that activity data, all those activity data features. Let's go ahead and switch to the whiteboard and do some more work on the whiteboard. Good, awesome. Okay, so now let's shift this conversation into thinking about purging and monitoring your disks, okay? So here we have, let's just think about, right, here this is C, okay? And every time a message comes into Ensembl, right, we're of course persisting it. That's part of the power of Ensembl, or any of the products that are using Ensembl. As it's built on cache, we can save it really fast. Okay, so we're persisting it, meaning really we're filling up our C disk here. Let's just imagine it's 1,000 gigs, right? Okay, this is our live environment. Now, so messages come in, we're saving them, persisting them, C is filling up. But then, of course, we say we're going to keep 30 days worth of data, so every night we purge the 31st day. So then we're also coming in here and getting rid of some of the data, right? And then the next day, we fill that space back up and we add more and we're purging, okay? So depending on how the state or depending on what your integration engine is doing, right, you might have the similar volume every day, or it could be increasing if you add interfaces, that type of thing. Okay, now there's another thing that's happening when you purge a message, right? And some of you might be thinking this. You also have a journal directory, which I'm going to call J here. Okay, so your production's storing messages. Okay, they're all getting saved, into that database that's on C. And here we have, maybe it's 1,000 gigs. Here you also have a journal. Every time you write to C, we are writing to the journal as well. And don't really think about it as a one-to-one relationship. It's much more complicated than that. But just think, writing over here, writing over here. Okay. Also, when at night you want to purge that 31st day, we delete this stuff. Okay. And we also write to the journal the fact that we deleted it. Okay, so the journal's therefore, what it's doing low level is it's just recording every single set and kill that cache that's happening in cache. Okay, so a set is when you're writing a message. A kill would be then when you're purging a message. The journal's remembering all that stuff in case you have to back up. You say back up this morning. You take your OS back up. You back up to this morning, and then you replay the journal to catch yourself up if you had some disaster happen. Okay, so now some of you might be familiar with the alternate journal directory as well. I'll just call that AJ for now. So that's there in case you fill up J. So you fill up J, all that, then you pop over to here to the alternate journal and you start writing in there. I'm not going to talk about that much here because you shouldn't just be writing in the alternate journal every day and writing over here. Okay, this is like a last resort type of deal. You should be monitoring this one. So that's what we're going to focus on for now. If you have questions about that, we can ask. We'll get to them at the end. But okay. Okay, so now also for the HL7 folks that are tuning in, I also want to keep in mind that you have one ADT message come in to Ensembl. Okay, and here we have Ensembl, just a big E there. We'll give a box around that. Okay, remember, you might be blasting that message to 20 plus downstream systems, and you might be doing a data transformation. I'll just draw a little triangle there, a data transformation on all of those. Okay, so that's one message in. That's a message body. It has a header, of course. Okay, and then could be 20 plus messages out, each with their own header. Okay, so thinking about just one input is one message in Ensembl is absolutely the wrong way to go. It can be much more complicated than that. And in the typical case, it really is much more complicated than that, right? So one HL7 input, we've created, it could be 30 plus messages. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, so let's also think about what happens when we're purging in this situation. I'm going to make these drawings a little smaller here. So let's have our C, and we have our J. Okay, so this is, we're imagining this is the C disk, and this is all the free space, and here's J is on a different disk, which is obviously, which is recommended for many reasons that I'm not going to go into here. But so J is on a different disk, just think different directory, different disk, okay? And the free space is what's up here at the top, and basically we want to ensure that there's enough free space in case we get a bunch more messages in today than we've gotten in the past. We want to make sure there's enough free space. So it's really the free space up here at the top that we want to monitor, okay? That's really the same thing as saying out of 1,000 gigs, how much space am I using? We kind of think about it in the opposite way. Say, okay, 1,000 gigs, I'm using 400, meaning I have 600 free, right? Cool. Okay, so let's talk about, here we'll have here we have message volume, and then over here we'll have time. Okay? So let's just add some complexity to this story here. So maybe you've deployed some interfaces in Health Connect, and you could be using a production for another reason as well, but you have roughly the same amount of traffic every day. Okay? So here's like day 1, and here's day 30 over here. And I'm not going to draw the dashes exactly right? But you have just a couple thousand messages every day. Of course, it fluctuates a little bit, right? But you can see you're roughly kind of in the same zone here. Okay. So what would happen if you, and we'll even add a day 31 here, right? So what happens, and as we're marching along that way, each time we're writing to C, we're writing into C over here, and because we're writing to C, those are sets, we're writing to the journal over here. Okay. Now what happens once we get to day 31 here, and maybe we're purging everything, older than 30 days, so we've got to come over and purge. Okay. So that's like erasing some stuff over here, but we still add to the journal. By the way, there's recommended approaches of when to purge the journal. That's kind of a different topic. Basically, you do it depending on your backup schedule, or you could just say do it after a certain number of days. Okay, so we get there. Now let's say, so same thing. We still have message volume and time. We'll say that this is day 32, and this is day. We'll just put a big 60 over here. Okay, And so we've been kind of stable, but then we said, okay, we're fine. We're migrating from our old interface engine into the Ensembl or HealthShare technology. What I want to go ahead and do is I want to, I'm saying, yeah, we're migrating over. Let's deploy a bunch more interfaces into Ensembl. Okay? Maybe you deploy some devices which are sending vital information, which have way more traffic than the other regular ADT stuff. Okay, so here then what could happen is that you have way more message volume. Okay. Now keep in mind the total amount of space that's on C here is the aggregate of the area under all these bar graphs. Okay, and obviously these I'm drawing these way bigger, right? So so the total space now being taken up on C is the aggregate of all that area. And let's just keep going here. Okay. So each day we add one of these big guys, but we're only purging a smaller one, right? So our total area, or the total amount of disk space that we're taking up on C is growing, right? We add one, and don't worry about these numbers exactly right. I'm not worrying about getting them right. But each day we add a big guy because we've deployed new interfaces that have a ton of traffic. But we're deleting like the 10th day or whatever over here, and that wasn't that much. Okay, so we're like adding 10 lines over here, and then we're only, pardon me for dropping that, and then we're only deleting maybe 3 or 4. You do that every day, and don't forget we're also doing that in the journal. Okay, so you do that every day. You add 6. Okay, you're deleting maybe 4 lines here. Obviously, we're just abstracting all of that. But you can see that very quickly, just a small percentage growth. Okay, we're purging a little bit, adding a lot. Okay, that could definitely create problems. Okay, you want to monitor your disk space here, as most of you probably know, which is why you're tuning in, because if these fill up, okay, if your main disk fills up, or if you pop over to your alternate journal directory and then maybe that one fills up, you're really totally out of luck. Everything shuts down, okay, and your integration engine is not working. We can't write any new messages into cache because there's no room. Okay, so it's a huge problem. You can't easily unwind it. Luckily, you guys are attending this webinar to learn how to proactively monitor both of these so that you can get alerted. Say, hey, send me an alert every single day. Tell me how much disk space I have left. Do I have 500 gigs left? And that should be roughly stable, right? If you're not in this case where we're purging a little bit and growing, but if you were in the previous case where it was roughly stable, then you're just always like adding a couple lines, deleting a couple lines, adding a couple lines, deleting a couple lines. Also, the journal is on its own purging schedule. That should be roughly stable as well because you're adding the same amount of stuff that you're deleting over here in C. Okay, so what we're going to learn when I pop back over the demo is how to monitor these proactively. Okay, so the idea is going to be every day you're going to get an email when you're at your desk. Maybe it's at 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and they're going to say, okay, directory C has 500 gigabytes left. And you're going to say, great. If you see that fluctuate, and then it's 500, it's always 500, everybody, all the support team knows it's always around 500, but then one day it drops to 480, that'll be a big jump in a day. If it jumps again another day, now you're at 20 gigs a day shrinking. Okay, that is going to add up very quickly because, again, you can fall into this kind of situation. 20 gigs over 30 days is obviously a lot. Okay, also, so just to get some more interaction from the crowd, I'd like to ask the second poll. So for those of you that are running live productions, how long do you keep messages in your live environment? We'll just go ahead and get that second poll up. And obviously, we have some ranges there for you. Okay, excellent. So it looks like a lot of folks are keeping them between 8 and 30 days. Oh, and okay, very interesting as well. A lot of people keeping them over 90 days. So we have, of course, folks in the middle as well. So that should shed some light. So different organizations have different policies, especially if it's HL7 messages. You got to keep those clinical messages. Some say we want the integration team to keep them for 180 days or maybe even more for a year. Some organizations don't lean on the integration team as much in that way, and they say, well, it's not the integration team's job to keep all of the messages forever and ever. Really, the upstream system should be doing that, and then those folks can purge them purge them more often. Okay. Okay, so here you might be thinking, great, Michael. Okay, so there's my live environment, my live production. I know I'm writing to one disk, writing all those messages to C, and I'm journaling as well into the J directory. But I also have a mirror setup. Okay, I've set up mirroring because if my main production goes down, I want another one to pop up, and just within a couple of seconds it pops up, and then the integration can continue because for some reason my large production failed or the machine failed underneath it. Okay, so here if we have your live environment, you might have your primary mirror member. I'm going to put a P there. This is the live environment. Here, this is supposed to be a mirror, guys. And then we have over here, you'll have two mirror members very likely set up. One of them is your backup. Okay, those two communicate, okay, synchronously. So we'll just say they're going like that. Okay, then you also have this DR member, okay, and there the primary is just sending over to the DR like, hey, write all this stuff. Okay, so these two guys are synced up. If you don't know much about mirroring, that's okay. This is just set up for a high availability backup. So the primary fails, the backup pops up and then basically takes its place, and then the production just keeps continuing. Okay, so this is a very common architecture for a lot of customers that have Health Connect that are actually doing mirroring. All right, now the thing is here, these are all running, could be on different machines or different VMs. Okay, so we want to monitor C and J on this guy. We want to monitor C and J on that guy. We want to monitor C and J on this guy as well. Okay. Keep in mind when you're monitoring C, it's not, and you're going to see me do it in a second. Of course, cache is writing a bunch here, and you really shouldn't have another application messing around in there. But it is possible that someone like, a system administrator doesn't know exactly, what's happening on the C drive, and they put some big file or like a VM, a really, really big virtual machine, over on C and take up space. Okay, so that space is just taken up. Cache can't use it to write messages. Of course, you shouldn't do that, and you should try to prevent things like that from happening. But they can. So we want to monitor each one of these individually. It's not enough just to monitor this guy. Okay. Also, the primary, some organizations have different resources. The primary might be on like the best resources. We recommend that the backup is on something similar, but it could be the case that the backup doesn't have as much memory or doesn't have as much disk space as the primary. So that can also happen as well. So you really need to monitor all three of these. Okay, the strategy for this is we're going to say, every day when I'm at my desk, send me an update, send me 6 emails. That sounds like a lot, but you just get used to it, and it's just to quickly monitor and then delete them. Okay, and you're going to send them to everybody that's on the integration team. Okay, of course you can monitor your disks outside of Ensembl. You can do it with OS stuff. Some organizations, the folks monitoring the disks are different people that are really doing the Ensembl integrations. Sometimes it's, those people are really tightly knit. The way I'm showing you right now is how to do it all inside, really, Ensembl and cache. Okay, you can do this other ways. Keep that in mind. The fact that you're monitoring them, though, should happen regardless. Okay, so our solution is going to be all contained inside cache, but regardless, you should be monitoring both of these directories. Okay, so every day we're going to get an email about C and J over here, C and J over here, C and J over here. 6 separate emails. Also, we're going to create something. Okay, so those are what we call loud emails. They're just always blasting us an update no matter what. Loud alerts. Okay. Also, we're going to have set up more quiet alerts that run just to check, saying, hey, if there is less than, and it all depends on how much hardware you have, but if there's less than 200 gigs left on C, or something could be something different on J depending on their sizes. If there's less than 200 gigs on on C, that's my threshold. Then send me an alert. Okay, so we're gonna have 2 things going on each one of these machines. Okay, before I leave the whiteboard. And so this is just for the live environment, right? Over on test environment, you don't need to worry so much about monitoring the disk space there. Again, if the disks fill up here, you're really, really out of luck. It's a bad problem. So we're proactively monitoring to know when when they're getting close to getting full. Also, I'd like to plug that if you don't know why they're getting full, that's okay. you've taken the steps to proactively monitor it, you can just immediately call our support and say, hey, our disk's just filled up, we're below our threshold of 200 gigs, I'm worried that something's happening, I don't understand why there's more traffic in my production, and our support will go help you figure that out and debug that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get back into the demo here. Okay, so I have some code that was originally created by Randy Pallotta, who is a sales engineer here at InterSystems, so plug to you there, Randy. I tweaked this code a little bit. It will be available to everybody who's tuned into this webinar. I'd like to say before we get into it, this is not production code, okay? This is not tested for sure to just go run in your live environment. It is solid and will get you started, but you definitely should, you definitely want to test this a bunch before you throw it and test it and tweak it. Fine-tune it to your own needs before you actually put it into a live production, okay? So this is not production ready. This is just sample stuff. I don't have a bunch of error checking. I could have more error checking in there, obviously. Okay, so how do we monitor our disks from inside Ensembl or Cache? And again, of course, you could do this from the OS, but folks often think it's nice to do it right inside Ensembl or Cache because the integration engine team has access to Ensembl and Cache, and you can just solve this problem right in here yourselves. So what I'm going to do is if I go to System Operation Task Manager, Task Schedule, you'll see that down here I have two monitors. I have a daily free space monitor set up. Let's blow that up. Apologies. And a free space alert monitor. Okay, so this one, daily free space monitor, let's go ahead and select it and edit it. It sends a daily email at 11 o'clock showing, and I made a little typo there, free disk space. Okay, the task type is this webinar sample OS free space monitor. Okay, that's showing up in the drop-down there because I created, or inspired from Randy's code, this class here, webinar sample OS free space monitor. Okay, it extends this sys task definition. That's all well documented how to do that as well. Basically, just extend this, and then you can write your own code and put it on a schedule. Okay, so that's what's happening here. The code takes a couple arguments. The first argument is that this one's saying auto send the email. So this is the one that's just going to send me an email every single day at 11 o'clock. Okay? The directory we're monitoring here is the E directory. I set up two directories on my machine that are very, very small. I have an E directory. That's what's actually storing the data. I have a J directory. That's for the journals, of course. Okay, so if you want to play around with something like this on yourself on on your own laptop or in a VM, you could create these partitions like I did. You can find how to do that on Google if you don't know how. Okay, so I'm saying directory to monitor E. That's where all my data is getting stored. Email recipient list. Now the point here is that we actually want everybody on our team to receive the emails here. So just pretending that Shane Rose is also on the integration or also on the support team with me, I also want to email him. Okay, so all of us are going to get these emails every single day at 11 o'clock, or maybe it's just half the team or something. That way, if one person's out and something changed, it doesn't get unnoticed. Okay, free space threshold. I don't have a threshold here because I just want this email every day at 11. You're going to see in a second we're going to use that threshold. You pick your SMTP server, you name it. This is my live webinar demo prod. Okay, and we'll even say this is the primary. I don't have a mirror actually set up. But cool. And then I'll say next. And then I'm going to schedule this daily. We'll start it today. And we'll run once at 11 o'clock. Let's just make it a little more interesting. See if we can catch 25 right there. We'll say finish. Perfect. Okay, now I also, so that should kick off in just a little bit. As that email is coming, let's go to the free space alert monitor and check that out. We'll edit that one. Okay, so the free space alert monitor, okay, sends emails if disk space is less than the threshold. It's still the same task type. We just wrote the code for this task to be flexible so that I can say, okay, you know what? I don't want to auto send an email for this one. I want the free space threshold to be 3. So if I have, and this is obviously unrealistic, right? This would be more like 300 gigabytes or something like that, or something much more. I just created these little baby disks, which are just 5 gigabytes each on my machine. Okay, so here the free space threshold is 3. And we're going to have this task run every 5 minutes. And I'm also going to include Shane here. Okay, so this task is going to run. It's going to say, hey, is there less than 3 gigs available? If so, problem, send an alert to Michael Brady and Shane Rose. Shane's maybe the support guy here, so he's like, he's the from address. And we're going to say live webinar demo prod primary is the one we're monitoring here. I'll go to next. I'm going to say start today, and I didn't want to get a bunch of emails, so I'm going to obviously say let's run this every 5 minutes. First time to run, let's zero that out. Okay. Okay. So that task is just every 5 minutes running, and it's seeing, like, so, for some reason at midnight, you go over your threshold. You say, oh, you have less than 300 gigs left or less than 400 gigs left. Then you're immediately going to get a notification about that. Let's hop over to my email. Okay, this email, this is the first one. Okay, live webinar demo prod primary daily free space monitor. You have 3.81 gigabytes of free space available. Okay, so that's the first one I scheduled. I said just schedule once a day at 11:25, and it came in 11:25, right? Sent email to me and to Shane at system.com. Excuse the typo there. Okay, so now we know that that background one is running every 5 minutes, checking if there's less than 3 available. So that's never going to fire off, right, until we force it to. So let's go in there and force it to. So we have, and by the way, guys, I set up, it's important to realize this, when I set up my production in webinar demo, okay, so I have this webinar demo namespace. If I look at system administration configuration namespaces, that webinar demo here, the default database for globals is webinar data. Okay, webinar data is where it's storing all the messages. And if you go in there and look at local databases and you look at webinar data, check it out, it's eWebinar data. So I had to set that up when I set up the namespace just for this, for this test. These are all things that you would indeed set up when you were, setting up your live environment as well. It just might have happened so long ago. For some of you folks, you might have forgotten that. Okay, so let's go into E, and here I have this folder, and you can see the properties on that folder. It's basically a gigabyte. Okay. And here's the webinar data folder. It's really not big. Even though I have thousands of messages in there, it's only 100, I have thousands and thousands in there. It's only 104 megabytes. Okay, so the whole drive, E, is 5. I have this 1 gigabyte folder there. And that's why, the 1 gig plus our webinar data, so 5 minus, 1.2 or whatever, that's why we're seeing we have 3.81 available. Okay, so if I go in here now and in this folder, I have a bunch of roses because we're with the wonderful Shane Rose here. So if I go to my folder here and just, I'll copy that and paste it again. It's going to take a little bit because it's an entire gigabyte. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to eat up a bunch of space on this directory. Okay, this also illuminates the fact, or really makes it clear, right? It's not that just the cache data has to be taking up that directory. We just want to monitor the directory in general in case someone does something foolish or something they're not supposed to do and puts a big file on this directory. All right, so that's going to take a little bit to run. It is 11:29. Excellent. Thanks you. We are nearing the end here. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We probably have like 10-ish more minutes of presentation, and of course we'll take questions. And the entire video will be posted, of course, as well. So if you have to leave, I understand. Okay, so just want to do one more thing. I wanted to show you guys over here in System Explorer Task Manager New Task. I was monitoring my E drive. I also would want to monitor, of course, my J drive where the journals are. Okay, so here I would type, let's call this daily journal free space monitor. Okay, and I'm not going to write a description there, but we would say auto send the email, directory to monitor here, we're going to do J. Recipient list is still the same thing. Okay, and we don't need the threshold because this is the auto one. We type in the SMTP server name. I won't go ahead and finish it, but you guys get the idea. So we want both of those tasks set up for my journal as well. And then you'd have to go on your backup and do that as well, and go up on the disaster, the async mirror member, the disaster recovery system, and do this as well. Okay, so 4 tasks that you really have running. All right, let's see if I have, let's go ahead and go to Task Manager, Task Schedule. What I can do is I can actually, my free space alert monitor, I can just go and run that right now. Okay, so I'm going to run that right now. And we'll give it a minute. And let me just dig through there. We'll go to Task History. The free space alert monitor ran. And warning! Live webinar demo prod primary free space monitor. You have only 2.77 gigabytes of free space available. Okay, so it's working awesome. Probably just didn't kick around and hit the right time yet. Okay, so that's most of what I have there. Again, the code, the actual task that's running, okay, that we're scheduling, we schedule it in different ways, is this code here. We will provide that to all of you through the developer community after this. Just a bunch of code basically figuring out the disk size. Now, just want to show one more thing. If you wanted to do fancier stuff with the disk size and say, hey, great, showing me what I have available is great, but I want to know like a percentage, or I want to do some other arithmetic. Really what the code is calling is this #class library.file.get directory space. Okay, and you got to pass in a couple arguments there, but you can see there that once you pass that in, I said let's go to the, let's say write FS, which was storing the free space. So there you go, that one's in megabytes. You can change this up and have it be returned in gigabytes. Oop, that one's bytes. Maybe 2 is gigabyte. Anyway, you guys get the idea there. Okay, right. TS, that was the total space. Okay, so this one's listing it to us in megabytes. So you can play with this if you want to write your own task to have some other information in the email, like the percentage that's left on the disk or something like that. If you do that though, that's definitely okay, but I still recommend you having the literal number of gigabytes of free space available as well. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the video feed. Great, so we'll take questions in just 1 second. Like to highlight one more thing. So remember when I was drawing, I was drawing the bar graphs there, and we were imagining that we deployed some interfaces that were taking in a bunch more messages than we had before. So our total disk volume was growing over time. That's another reason where you might want to put those interfaces in their own production. Okay, so you have your main production doing all the regular stuff, and these high traffic interfaces in their own production, and maybe the purging schedule for that other production, the high traffic one, is shorter, right? So you only keep those messages for 7 days, but maybe over here you keep them for 30 days. Okay, that's a way to manage your disk space as well on that. Okay, so I think we do have some questions. I was seeing Shane typing away there. So thanks for sending those in to him. So let's take a couple of those.
Good. So earlier you mentioned the alternate journal directory. Would we also need a task to monitor the space for that?
Excellent question, Shane. So yeah, the alternate journal directory, that's its own directory. It should be separate from the main journal directory. I would say, and so you could have a task for it, but the bigger point is no, you really don't need one. You should just be monitoring the main journal directory. If it's ever the case that that one fills up, you're already in a problem where you should be actively trying to solve it. And that could be being on the, is likely or should be that you're calling our support and on the phone with us to actively figure that out. So if you're spilling over the regular journal into the alternate journal, you're already in a problem anyway. Luckily, monitoring the journal is enough there. Right when you start filling the journal up, you should be actively debugging. So it's like you're catching the problem way before it turns into that bad of a monster.
Okay, so with these emails that are arriving, what would also be the best way to track the % change in disk space over time so you could see a trend?
Nice. So good question. So whoever typed that in might be thinking, I'm going to have like 500 gigabytes of free space available, or maybe more, depending. What if I really just want to know if I'm growing by 1 or 2%? So I have 2% less or 5% less available. That would be really bad, right? Because 5% over 30 days is a lot. So the best way to do that, what you can do is the task that's running to check the amount of disk space every day, you just make an entry into your own table. So just every day, make an entry into your own table, record that, and maybe you just want to compare today and the day before, or maybe you want to keep 10 days worth of data. Very easy to do the arithmetic. Basically just that task when it runs, instead of just sending the email, you also have to make an entry into another table.
And finally, is it possible with the pre-built activity dashboard to view volume across multiple productions at the same time, or is it just one production?
Excellent question. It is possible to view multiple productions at one time. Basically what you have to do there is, say you have 3 productions. The recommended approach, and this is in documentation, the recommended approach is that you create a special monitoring namespace, so webinar, demo, prod, monitor namespace, and all 3 of those productions just send all of their information over to that, into that namespace.
That's it. So that's it.
Excellent. So it looks like those are all the questions that were typed in. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. I'm really, really excited to see that the audience was large for this. Also remember that if you didn't get all your questions answered, or you have a minute to marinate and then you think of more questions, we will have a developer community page about this. So you can post the questions there as well, and I'll respond, or Shane will respond, or something to that effect. Last thing, the code that we looked through, you will have access to that as well, but I just want to plug you, say it's not production code, it's just a sample thing that we were using for this demonstration. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Shane Rose, as well. We also have a killer production team here. We have John Cherry, Emma McVicker, and Janine Perkins. All those guys helped throw this event for you as well. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have an excellent Thursday.